The deep sea is darker than space, yet it's full of life. There's a worm that hunts by flipping its throat inside out like a movie monster, a lobster that looks exactly like a head crab from Half-Life, and a larva once cataloged as a sea monster before scientists realized it was just a baby shrimp. Now, before we dive into the abyss, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more, and strap in, because I'm Mike with List 25, and here are 25 bizarre deep sea adaptations you won't believe. 25. The Polychaete Worm. Yeah, I knew that visual was going to grab your attention. Alien, right? This worm was hauled up from nearly 3,900 feet off the coast of New Zealand in 2012. It looks almost harmless. It's pink and shiny, almost pretty, but polychaete worms aren't exactly gentle. Those tentacles on its head are really sensory organs built to track their prey. And when something small gets too close, the worm flips its throat inside out like a movie monster and snaps it up in an instant. Luckily, they max out at about 4 inches and stick to deep sea slopes and vent areas. Still, I'm not really sure how I feel about the fact that there are worms out there hunting with their throats. 24. The Squat Lobster. Tell me that doesn't look like a head crab. This squat lobster turned up on the very same expedition that pulled up the worm I just covered, only this time a little deeper, around 4,600 feet off New Zealand. Now, squat lobsters aren't exactly new to science, but this particular species was a first. They're strange little crustaceans, with big front claws and bodies that look like they've been flattened for the deep. Depending on the species, they can use those claws to scrape algae, sift through debris, scavenge, or even go 100% predator. The truth is, scientists don't know much about this one yet, except for one detail. Almost every specimen they saw was found near or on deep sea corals, perfect little ecosystems, where these fellas and ladies live comfortably as the top predators. And just saying the name kind of reminds me of rock lobster. 23. The Gob-Faced Squid. If you ever wondered what a squid with dentures might look like, well, here you go. And those smiling teeth you see aren't teeth at all. They're folds of lip tissue wrapped around a beak, which makes the whole thing even more terrifying. I mean, just think about it. Why would it hide a beak behind something that looks like human teeth? The animal's discovery a few years ago made enough headlines that it quickly became a poster child for the Ugly Animal Preservation Society, a group dedicated to getting people interested in the kind of creatures that don't make us feel all warm and fuzzy inside. What makes it even more unusual is that we only know it from one specimen, an immature female just 40 millimeters long, caught in a net off of Tristan da Cunha in the South Atlantic at around 2,000 meters or 6,500 feet deep. So its friends are out there somewhere. 22. The Mirror-Eyed Ostracod. The Mirror-Eyed Ostracod is basically a predatory floating skull with headlights. Its whole body is packed into a round, translucent shell, and staring out from inside are 2 oversized silver eyes. Instead of lenses, the inside of those eyes are lined with reflective plates, like a satellite dish. They scoop up scattered light and aim it onto the retina, which is how this little orb can track its prey in the dark. They also come with almost neutral buoyancy and surprisingly smooth swimming, so they actively hunt copepods and other small planktonic animals down if they find them. We don't have a full playbook on its hunting strategy, like how often it grabs live versus dead prey, or how much of its diet comes from scavenging, but let's just say, being human has its perks. 21. Slime eels. If you think something slimy and gross can't be badass, let me introduce you to the hagfish. They don't have fancy eyes. What they do have is slime. Lots of it. When a predator gets too close, a hagfish shoots out mucus and super thin protein threads. The second that hits salt water, it turns into a huge gooey cloud that can clog a fish's gills. That gives the hagfish just enough time to tie itself into a knot and wriggle free. On top of that, they're usually the first animals to get to whale carcasses. Once hooked on that food, they'll burrow into the flesh, chewing their way inward. What's really gross, or amazing depending on how you look at it, is that they can even absorb nutrients through their skin, which means they can survive for months between big meals. 20. The Colossal Squid. You can't do a list like this without covering the Colossal Squid. It is easily one of the most mysterious deep sea animals out there. We've only found a handful of complete specimens so far. Most of the discoveries come from chance finds, beaks and scraps inside sperm whales, or the occasional body pulled up by Antarctic fishing vessels. However, earlier this year, 2025 for those of you watching in the future, we finally filmed a live juvenile in its natural habitat for the very first time. It was about a foot long and gliding around 2,000 feet down near the South Sandwich Islands. Along with their giant eyes and massive size, about 14 to 18 feet, weighing over half a ton, these animals have swiveling hooks on their arms. They spin like grappling hooks and lock into prey so it cannot break free. 19. Sea sapphires. What's not to love about a parasite that's been called the most beautiful animal you've ever seen? The sea sapphire is a copepod, only about 1 to 3 millimeters long. By day, they drift down into the mesopelagic zone, roughly 1,000 feet deep, and at night, they rise closer to the surface to feed. That back and forth already puts them in rare company, but what really makes them really stand out is the way they handle light. Males have layers of microscopic crystal plates in their skin. By shifting the spacing between those plates, they change which wavelengths bounce back. Seen head-on, sunlight hits them and they flash electric blue, gold, or green. Tilted another way, they all but disappear. So they can basically turn themselves invisible if they spot predators, or into beacons if they want to attract mates. 18. The monster larval shrimp. For almost 2 centuries, the world had a monster larva sitting in a specimen jar somewhere, because nobody could match it to any known animal. It had armor plates, a spiny red shell, and even little horn-like projections. Nothing about it screamed shrimp, but that's exactly what it was. We finally figured it out in the 2010s when DNA testing became involved. That heavy armor is an adaptation of the larva of the deep sea shrimp, while it lives higher up in the water column. Once it survives long enough, it sinks down and turns into a much more ordinary adult shrimp, trading in the monster suit for a life in the dark. 17. Dragonfish. Dragonfish don't need size to be terrifying. Most of these apex predators are barely a foot long, but their teeth stick out so far that they can't close their mouths properly. Those teeth are see-through, think glass, so when the jaw snaps open, nothing flashes or reflects. It's just black water, until the bite lands. Their real distinguishing feature, however, is their lighting system. Most deep-sea animals glow blue or green because that's the only color that travels that far underwater. Dragonfish are different. They've evolved a special patch under each eye that produces red light, which barely penetrates seawater and is invisible to almost every other fish. On top of that, their eyes are tuned to see it, so when they hunt, they can shine their own spotlight into the darkness to find their unsuspecting food. 16. The Cockeyed Squid. The Cockeyed Squid has literally split the job of seeing in two. It has one big eye and one small eye, and that mismatch is the whole point. The big eye is geared to look for any shadows from above, while the little one keeps watch for flashes of bioluminescence below. They don't float upright either. These squid tilt themselves, head angled down, fins up, so that each eye can line up with its world. Add in the scattered photophores across their body that blur their outline when something's hunting them from underneath, and you've got an animal that's 100% running 2 surveillance systems at once. 15. The Thieving Pram Bug. Every now and again, something comes along in our research that makes us wonder how to put it out there without getting demonetized. Trust me, bugs have done it here at List 25 before. So, let me just describe this little beast this way. The pram bug is a tiny glassy crustacean that turns other animals into mobile homes. That's not too bad, is it? It goes after gelatinous drifters like salps and siphonophores, and then gets rid of its insides, lays its eggs, and pushes the barrel through the water with its back legs like an underwater stroller. That makes the name make sense now, right? One species can also make itself more or less invisible with a natural anti-reflective coating. So while it's out there doing its thing to other animals, it's doing it completely camouflaged. 14. The Giant Isopod. Do you know what a pill bug looks like? Or a roly-poly? Well, take that, add armor, then scale it up till it's the size of your dinner plate, and now we'll be on the same page. Giant isopods are deep-sea crustaceans related to shrimp and crabs that have been patrolling the seafloor for more than 160 million years. Their oversized build comes from something called abyssal gigantism, the same rule that gave us the giant squid. These guys are scavengers before anything else. They'll eat anything dead, from whales to fish carcasses. But when food is scarce, they can slow everything down. Movement, breathing, digestion. They can slow it down so much that one in captivity actually survived without food for 4 years. 13. Viperfish. Nature usually balances things out. With the viperfish, it went all in on teeth and forgot about the rest. I'm not kidding. Unlike most deep-sea predators, the viperfish's skull actually rotates backwards when it opens its mouth to give it more room to swallow its oversized prey. And fun fact, they're fast. The strike happens in a split second. It's like a mousetrap going off in the dark. Add to that the fact that it doesn't have to eat every day, and that its stomach is so stretchy that it can swallow animals nearly twice its own length, and you have something akin to a perfect predator. 12. The Carnivorous Tunicate. Most tunicates glue themselves to a rock, suck in seawater, and filter out whatever tiny plankton drifts by. But down in the deep sea, we've come across a few tunicates that went rogue. The ghostfish, for example, sits still until a shrimp or small crustacean wanders in, and snaps shut like an underwater Venus flytrap. In 2009, researchers also found another meat-eating species off Tasmania, this one with a long tubular mouth pointed sideways like a funnel. Crazily enough, they're chordates, which makes them distant relatives of ours. Just like us, their embryos start out with a notochord, something like the first draft of a backbone. The difference between us and them, though, is that as the tunicate grows, it reabsorbs that structure along with its brain, trading it all in for the simple life of being a bag with a mouth. 11. The Holopus. Sea lilies might sound lovely, but the Holopus is anything but. It belongs to the crinoid family, making it a distant cousin of starfish and sea cucumbers. They used to be everywhere, but today you'll mostly find them under the ice or miles down in the dark. What sets the Holopus apart from its relatives is its arms. Most crinoids spread out delicate feather-like fronds to filter plankton. Holopus's limbs are fewer, thicker, and jointed like fingers. Instead of waving in the current, they stretch out like a hand. When their food gets too close, those arms curl inward and snap tight like a fist. I should also mention that a Holopus usually lives upside down, like a bat. Imagine being a fish and finding yourself underneath one of those. 10. The Giant Phantom Jelly. I took time to talk about the famous Colossal Squid, but jellies have their own monster down there. It's called the Giant Phantom Jelly, and unless you're in the right sub at the right time, you will never see one alive. In over a century of research, scientists have only spotted it a few dozen times. Instead of stinging tentacles, this jelly drifts with 4 thick sheet-like arms that can stretch over 20 feet long. They look like curtains flowing out behind it, but they're actually extensions of the digestive system, lined with channels that pump enzymes straight into whatever gets caught, which means their prey is already being digested the second it's wrapped up. 9. The Jellyfish Sea Cucumber. Sea cucumbers usually crawl or live along the sea floor. Not this one. It decided it wanted to live like a jellyfish instead. The jellyfish sea cucumber spends its whole life drifting, its transparent umbrella of webbing pulsing as it floats through the water column. That umbrella is actually a set of mouth tentacles stretched and fused into a huge swimming fin that dwarfs its tiny body. Anything small enough to fall into its funnel-shaped mouth, plankton, animal remains, anything digestible, gets eaten as it drifts. For decades, the only proof it existed was a few dried-up specimens sitting in museum collections. But thanks to deep-sea ROVs, NOAA has now filmed more than 100 of them, from 650 feet all the way down to nearly 15,000. 8. The Vent-Dwelling Tonguefish. There are about 140 species of tonguefish, and almost all of them stick to rivers, estuaries, or shallow tropical waters. And if you were wondering, they're called tonguefish because, frankly, that's what they look like. The vent-dwelling tonguefish is the only tonguefish we've ever found that prefers to live near hydrothermal vents, hence the name. In fact, they love it so much down there that submersibles have filmed them skipping across those pools of liquid sulfur. That's about 240 degrees Fahrenheit. Water hot enough to melt your hand off, yet these fish don't even flinch. Our biggest mystery is still how they survive down there. One guess is that they scrape their food from the bacterial mats growing around the vents, turning the death zone into their own kind of buffet. Either way, they're breaking the mold. 7. Whalefish, Bignoses, and Tapetails. Scientists are only human, so we can't really blame them if they make mistakes. But this was a biggie. For years, they believed that the whalefish, a deep-sea predator with a pelican-like mouth, the bignose, a fish without a digestive tract found only in male form, and Tapetail, a baby with a very long streamer trailing behind it, were 3 different species. In the end, it was the same animal at different life stages. Tapetails drifting near the surface eventually descend and split up to become males or females. The males become the oddities that hardly eat at all, and the females become the whalefish with the oversized gullets. Their only job is to survive just long enough to reproduce. 6. The sea pig. The sea pig is basically what happens when a jelly bean grows legs. They're sea cucumbers, but unlike their squattier cousins, they lift themselves off the ocean floor with tube-like feet to hover over the mud like it's trying not to touch anything. They're not rare. In fact, they're one of the most common animals spotted on the abyssal seafloor, especially off Monterey Bay. But just because they're everywhere doesn't mean we understand them. For starters, they sometimes gather in massive herds to feed on whale carcasses. That part makes sense. But we've also found them all just sitting there, looking off in the same direction. They also allow juvenile king crabs to ride them. No one knows why. The sea pigs don't shake them off, and the crabs don't seem to be attacking anything. They just sit there. We've found it often enough that scientists now believe it's a regular thing. 5. Antarctic Icefish. If you asked me to name a fish built for freezing water, the icefish would be at the top of that list. What makes them super different is that they don't have hemoglobin, no red blood cells. Their blood is basically clear, which sounds almost impossible until you remember they live in water that's colder than your freezer. To survive, these fish evolved special antifreeze glycoproteins that bind ice crystals and stop them from growing in their blood. That means their bodies don't turn into fish sickles when the temperature dips below 0. To compensate for the lack of red blood cells, they've also got bigger hearts, wider blood vessels, and thin skin that helps them pull oxygen directly from the water. 4. The Scaly-Foot Snail. This snail basically has its own suit of armor. Its shell is built in 3 layers: a normal calcified inner shell, an organic middle cushion, and then an outer coat made of iron sulfides pulled straight out of the hydrothermal vent fluids. Even its foot is covered in overlapping iron-coated scales that look like armor plates. Scientists think the metal shell helps to fend off predators and might even help to scatter the extreme heat from any vent eruptions. It also has a heart, so oversized that it not only takes up about 4% of its body, but it also pumps blood for the symbiotic bacteria living inside it. Those bacteria turn vent chemicals into food, making the snail more like a walking factory than a grazer. The bad news is that it's the first animal ever that had to be listed as endangered because of deep-sea mining. Only 3 known vent fields host it, and 2 of them are already licensed for mining, which means this snail's iron suit won't save it from us. 3. Siphonophores. Call it an animal if you want, but a siphonophore is more like a colony of clones called zooids, all stitched together and specializing in one job. Some are built to swim, some to catch prey, some to digest, some to reproduce. None of them can survive alone, but together they form one of the strangest bodies in the ocean, and the scale is ridiculous. The Portuguese man-o'-war is technically a siphonophore, but its giant cousin, Paraidubia, can stretch out over 150 feet long. That's longer than a blue whale. One filmed in 2020 off Australia was arranged in a slow-motion spiral of tentacles, a floating booby trap biologists nicknamed the Doom Spiral. Anything that brushes those stingers is paralyzed, reeled in, and digested by whichever zooid drew that assignment. 2. The Faceless Cusk. This is the no-face fish that tripped up the headlines in 2017 when Australia's RV investigator hauled one up from about 4,000 meters south of Sydney. The first one was found by the HMS Challenger all the way back in 1874, and thereafter it went missing from Australian records for more than a century. The name says it all. Its mouth sits on the underside, its tiny eyes are buried under skin, and the sides of the head look blank, so it looks like a fish with no face at all. Even their swimming is weird. Instead of a tail, the back end is just one continuous fin, so it moves more like a ribbon than something with a tail. 1. Anglerfish. You didn't think I'd get through this whole list without the fish from Finding Nemo, did you? There are over 200 species of anglerfish, most of them living beyond 3,000 feet down in the Atlantic and Antarctic oceans. The females can get close to 3 feet long, but it's the lure that steals the show. That glowing spine dangling above the mouth is pure deep-sea trickery, drawing prey close enough for a snap they can take down something twice their size. The males? Different story. They max out at about 8 inches and spend their lives hunting for a female, not food. Because remember, fish are friends, not food. Once they find her, they bite in, fuse with her body, and slowly lose everything. Their eyes, organs, independence, until all that's left is a little sack of testes she carries around for easy breeding. And yes, some females have a whole collection attached at once, which is where I will leave that. And that's a wrap. But you know the deal. Quiz time before you go. The Mirror-Eyed Ostracod is basically a floating skull with headlights. But what do those silvery eyes actually use to see in the dark? Is it A, reflective plates, B, crystal rods, C, lenses, or D, sheer luck? Put your answers in the comments below. And while you're there, let me know what kind of deep sea list you'd like to see next. And if you're ready to keep going, well, watch our related video, 25 Biggest Ocean Mysteries Science Can't Explain. It's got ruins no one can explain, glowing orbs, and a few other things we just don't have any answers for. You'll see the link to that video in just a second. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember, like, share, comment, subscribe, notification bell, and I'll catch you next time.